Every American strategic bomber ever built, from propellers to flying wings. Subscribe for more videos. Let's begin. The Pioneers, the first strategic bombers. Boeing XB-15, the experimental giant. First flew in 1937 as America's experimental leap into long-range strategic bombing. With a 149-foot wingspan and four 850-horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines, it could carry 2,500 pounds of bombs over 5,130 miles. Only one prototype was built, but proved large multi-engine bombers could fly intercontinental distances. It served as a transport during World War II, validating concepts defining American strategic aviation for 8 decades. Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, the Daylight Warrior. Entering service in 1938, it became backbone of America's daylight precision bombing campaign over Europe. At 74 feet long with 4 Wright Cyclone engines producing 1,200 horsepower each, it could carry 4,500 pounds of bombs at 287 miles per hour. Between 1938 and 1945, Boeing built 12,731 B-17s. The 8th Air Force lost 4,735 B-17s, a 47% loss rate. The B-17 proved daylight bombing worked. The price was written in blood. Consolidated B-24 Liberator, the mass production achievement. First flying in 1941, it became the most produced American military aircraft in history. With a 110-foot wingspan and 4 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 engines, it carried 8,000 pounds of bombs at 290 miles per hour over 2,100 miles. American factories produced 18,482 Liberators between 1941 and 1945. The B-24 served in every theater from bombing Ploesti oil fields to hunting submarines over the Atlantic. Douglas XB-19, the largest piston bomber. First flying in 1941 as the largest American aircraft built before World War II, it featured a 212-foot wingspan and 4 Wright R-3350 engines. Weighing 162,000 pounds fully loaded, it could carry 37,100 pounds of bombs. Only one was built and never saw combat. Too slow at 224 miles per hour and too expensive to mass produce, Douglas used lessons from it to design post-war cargo aircraft. Boeing YB-40 Flying Fortress, the gunship escort. Flying combat missions in 1943 as an experimental gunship escort for B-17 formations, Boeing converted 25 B-17s to YB-40 configuration, stripping the bomb bay and adding 14.50 caliber machine guns plus 11,000 rounds. Only 13 flew combat missions over Europe in mid-1943. The concept failed because the heavily armed YB-40 could not keep up with lighter B-17s after dropping bombs. The World War II giants, atomic delivery systems. Boeing B-29 Superfortress, the revolutionary bomber. Entering service in 1944, it revolutionized strategic bombing with pressurized crew compartments, remote-controlled gun turrets, and atomic weapons capability. At 99 feet long with 4 Wright R-3350 engines producing 2,200 horsepower each, it could carry 20,000 pounds of bombs at 350 miles per hour to targets 3,250 miles away. Boeing built 3,970 B-29s. The B-29 firebombed Japanese cities and dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Consolidated B-32 Dominator, the backup plan. Entering service in 1944 as insurance against B-29 failure, it featured a 135-foot wingspan and 4 Wright R-3350 engines. The B-32 carried 20,000 pounds of bombs at 357 miles per hour over 3,800 miles. Consolidated built 118 B-32s, but only 15 saw combat in the Pacific during final weeks of World War II. The B-32 flew the last American combat mission on August 18, 1945. Boeing B-50 Superfortress, the improved version. Entering service in 1947 as an improved B-29 with more powerful Pratt & Whitney R 4360 engines producing 3,500 horsepower each. It could carry 20,000 pounds of bombs at 395 miles per hour over 4,650 miles. Boeing built 371 B-50s between 1947 and 1953. In 1949, Lucky Lady 2 completed the first nonstop around-the-world flight with aerial refueling, covering 23,452 miles in 94 hours. Post-war giants, the atomic deterrent. Convair B-36 Peacemaker, the piston jet hybrid. Entering service in 1949 as the largest mass-produced piston-engine aircraft ever built, it featured a 230-foot wingspan and 6 Pratt & Whitney R-4360 engines plus 4 General Electric J-47 turbojets. The B-36 could carry 86,000 pounds of bombs at 435 miles per hour over 10,000 miles. Convair built 384 B-36s between 1946 and 1954. The B-36 could strike any Soviet target from American bases and return without refueling. Early jet bombers, the transition era. North American B-45 Tornado, the first jet bomber. Entering service in 1948 as America's first operational jet bomber, it featured a 96-foot wingspan and 4 General Electric J-47 turbojets. The B-45 could carry 22,000 pounds of bombs at 579 miles per hour over 1,910 miles. North American built 143 B-45s between 1947 and 1950. The B-45 served primarily in reconnaissance roles during the Korean War, photographing targets deep in North Korea and China. Boeing B-47 Stratojet, the swept-wing revolution. Entering service in 1951, it revolutionized bomber design with swept wings, pod engines, and bicycle landing gear. With a 116-foot wingspan and 6 General Electric J-47 turbojets, it could carry 25,000 pounds of bombs at 607 miles per hour over 4,000 miles. Boeing built 2,032 B-47s between 1947 and 1956. The B-47's swept-wing design influenced every jet aircraft that followed. Experimental competitors, the design competition. Convair XB-46, the lost competition. First flying in 1947 as one of 3 jet bomber prototypes competing for Air Force contracts, it featured a 115-foot wingspan and 4 General Electric J-35 turbojets. The XB-46 could carry 22,000 pounds of bombs at 545 miles per hour. Only one prototype was built. It lost the competition to Boeing's B-47, which offered superior performance and range. Convair scrapped the program in 1950. Martin XB-48, the 6-engine alternative. First flying in 1947 as another jet bomber prototype competing against the B-47, it featured a 108-foot wingspan and 6 Allison J-35 turbojets. The XB-48 could carry 22,000 pounds of bombs at 516 miles per hour. Martin built 2 prototypes featuring bicycle landing gear and outrigger wheels, an unusual configuration. The Air Force chose Boeing's B-47 instead, and Martin canceled the program in 1950. Northrop YB-49, the flying wing. First flying in 1947 as a jet-powered flying wing derived from the piston engine YB-35, it featured a 172-foot wingspan and 8 Allison J-35 turbojets. The YB-49 could carry 16,000 pounds of bombs at 493 miles per hour over 4,000 miles. Northrop built 2 YB-49s. The flying wing offered exceptional range and stealth, but stability problems and a fatal crash in 1948 doomed the program. Cold War heavyweights, supersonic dreams. Convair YB-60, the jet-powered B-36. First flying in 1952 as a jet-powered version of the B-36, it featured a 206-foot wingspan and 8 Pratt & Whitney J-57 turbojets. The YB-60 could carry 72,000 pounds of bombs at 508 miles per hour. Only one prototype was built, competing directly against Boeing's B-52, which offered better performance despite being smaller. The Air Force chose the B-52 in 1952. Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, the Eternal Bomber. Entering service in 1955, it became the longest-serving bomber in aviation history. With a 185-foot wingspan and 8 Pratt & Whitney J57 turbojets, it could carry 70,000 pounds of bombs at 650 miles per hour over 8,800 miles. Boeing built 744 B-52s between 1952 and 1962. The B-52 dropped conventional bombs in Vietnam, launched cruise missiles in Iraq, and continues flying combat missions today. The Air Force plans to operate B-52s until 2050. Convair B-58 Hustler, the supersonic racer. Entering service in 1960 as the world's first supersonic bomber, it featured a 56-foot wingspan and 4 General Electric J-79 turbojets with afterburners. The B-58 could carry 19,450 pounds of bombs at Mach 2 over 4,400 miles. Convair built 116 B-58s between 1956 and 1962. The Hustler set 19 world speed and altitude records, but required 3 crew members and extensive ground support. The Air Force retired it in 1970 after 10 years. North American XB-70 Valkyrie, the Mach 3 Dream. First flying in 1964 as a Mach 3 strategic bomber designed for 70,000 feet, it featured a 105-foot wingspan and 6 General Electric YJ-93 turbojets. The XB-70 could carry 50,000 pounds of bombs at Mach 3 over 4,300 miles. North American built 2 prototypes featuring a delta wing that folded down at supersonic speeds. Soviet surface-to-air missiles made high-altitude bombing obsolete before production began. Congress canceled the program in 1961. Variable geometry, the swing wing era. General Dynamics FB-111A, the fighter bomber. Entering service in 1967 as a strategic bomber variant of the F-111 tactical fighter, it featured a 70-foot wingspan swept to 33 feet and 2 Pratt & Whitney TF-30 turbofans. The FB-111A could carry 37,500 pounds of bombs at Mach 2.5 over 4,100 miles. General Dynamics built 76 FB-111A aircraft between 1967 and 1971. It served with Strategic Air Command until 1991, then transferred to Tactical Air Command until 1996. Rockwell B-1A, the supersonic replacement. First flying in 1974 as a supersonic strategic bomber designed to replace the B-52, it featured a 137-foot wingspan swept to 79 feet and 4 General Electric F-101 turbofans. The B-1A could carry 75,000 pounds of bombs at Mach 2.2 over 6,100 miles. Rockwell built 4 B-1A prototypes. President Carter canceled the program in 1977, choosing cruise missiles and the B-2 stealth bomber. The B-1A proved swing-wing bombers could fly Mach 2. Rockwell B-1B Lancer, the low-level striker. Entering service in 1986 as a revised B-1A optimized for low-altitude penetration instead of high-altitude speed, it featured a 137-foot wingspan swept to 79 feet and 4 General Electric F-101 turbofans. The B-1B could carry 75,000 pounds of bombs at Mach 1.25 over 5,100 miles. Rockwell built 100 B-1B aircraft. The Lancer dropped more bombs in Afghanistan and Iraq than any other bomber, proving low and fast beats high and fast. Stealth generation, invisible strike. Northrop B-2 Spirit, the invisible bomber. Entering service in 1989 as the world's first operational stealth bomber, it featured a 172-foot wingspan and 4 General Electric F-118 turbofans buried in the flying wing. The B-2 could carry 40,000 pounds of bombs at 630 miles per hour over 6,900 miles. Northrop built 21 B-2s between 1987 and 2000 at $2.2 billion per aircraft. The B-2's flying wing design and radar-absorbent materials made it virtually invisible. The Spirit struck targets in Serbia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider, the future. First flying in 2023 as America's next-generation stealth bomber with an estimated 150-foot wingspan and 2 Pratt & Whitney engines, specifications remain classified. The Air Force will build at least 100 Raiders at approximately $700 million each, replacing the B-1B and B-2 fleet by 2030. The B-21 incorporates lessons from the B-2 with advanced stealth technology, but costs one-third as much. The Raider represents the future of penetrating strike against advanced air defenses. Early monoplane bombers, the transition era. Boeing B-9, the monoplane pioneer. First flying in 1931 as one of the first American monoplane bombers, it featured a 99-foot wingspan and two Pratt & Whitney R-1860 Hornet engines producing 575 horsepower each. The B-9 could carry 2,000 pounds of bombs at 188 miles per hour over 900 miles. Only one prototype was built. The B-9 proved monoplane design was superior to biplanes, influencing every design that followed and establishing modern bombardment aviation configuration. Martin B-10, the influential design. First flying in 1932 as the most influential American bomber of the 1930s, it featured a 97-foot wingspan and two Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines. The B-10 could carry 2,260 pounds of bombs at 207 miles per hour over 1,200 miles. Only 121 were built, but the B-10's design philosophy influenced an entire generation of bombers. Its stressed skin construction and retractable landing gear became standard on subsequent designs. Douglas B-18 BULO, the transition bomber. Entering service in 1937 as an early twin-engine bomber, it featured a 61-foot wingspan and two Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines producing 1,000 horsepower each. The B-18 could carry 2,400 pounds of bombs at 217 miles per hour over 1,025 miles. Douglas built 359 B-18s before production shifted to the B-24 Liberator. The B-18 established the twin-engine bomber standard that continued through the war, representing American bombing doctrine before pressurized cabins became essential. Experimental variants, advanced concepts. Consolidated XB-41 Flying Fortress, the escort experiment. Flying in 1943 as an experimental fighter escort variant of the B-24 Liberator, it featured additional machine guns and modified fuselage for air-to-air combat capability. The XB-41 sacrificed bomb capacity for defensive firepower to protect bomber formations. Boeing converted B-17 models into similar YB-40 configurations. The XB-41 concept ultimately failed because specialized bombers could not keep pace with formations after dropping bombs. Consolidated XB-44 Superfortress, the experimental variant. Flying in 1945 as an experimental variant of the B-29 Superfortress with upgraded Pratt & Whitney R-4360 engines, it featured improved performance and range. Only one XB-44 was built as technology demonstrator. The XB-44 proved engine upgrades could extend bomber capabilities, though the post-war B-50 provided better results. It represented iterative improvement rather than revolutionary change. Martin XB-51, the Korean War light bomber. First flying in 1950 as a light, jet-powered tactical bomber and reconnaissance aircraft, it featured a 35-foot wingspan and two General Electric J-35 turbojets. The XB-51 could carry 3,000 pounds of bombs at 580 miles per hour. 3 prototypes were built, but never entered production as the F-84 Thunderjet proved more effective. The XB-51 represented attempts to create jet-powered ground attack aircraft optimized for close air support. Lockheed XF-90 Model 4, the interceptor concept. Flying in 1946 as an experimental jet-powered interceptor, it featured a 68-foot wingspan and 2 Allison J-35 turbojets. While not a strategic bomber, the XF-90 was tested as a high-speed reconnaissance platform capable of escaping enemy fighters through pure speed. Only 2 prototypes were built. The XF-90 represented exploration of speed as a defensive mechanism, ultimately proving dedicated long-range fighters provided better reconnaissance solutions. Subscribe for more videos.